Lindsey, let's talk about young people and vaping. There are significant difficulties facing regulators in balancing the public health benefits of adult vaping with the risk to young people. What do the data say about this phenomenon?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really there's ethical dilemmas in this kind of part. I mean, you don't want any young people using these products. And that's where, THR is going to have to face a reckoning because it's like, oh, these products are designed for people who smoke. Well, what happens when we have no smoke, no smokers left? I mean, you can't keep using that argument on this one. And their introduction, though, it was like I've been looking at the data, the BRFIS data, Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, survey data from the CDC for now, God, going back to like 2020, actually. And it's been really fun to watch the young adult smoking rate just go, it's been eradicated. So, in the US, in 2023, like 20.9% of 18 to 24-year-olds were vaping, and they are the highest contingent. Now, I was looking at the numbers earlier. It's like 16% of 25 to 34-year-olds that are vaping. And so you're just going to see that those numbers increase too. But the one part that you saw is that those 18 to 24-year-olds, only 5.5% of them were smoking. And this is huge because 20 years ago in 2003, 29.1% of them were smoking. And they've always been consistently like the group that smokes the most or have the highest rates of smoking. So, well, I mean, most of them, as I know, I'll be out and hanging out and see some young people, and they're under the impression that vaping is just as harmful, if not, or not more harmful than combustible cigarettes. But they are still using these products, and they're not smoking. And the idea, even though they might not understand that it's a harm reduction tool, as far as like the cost associated with cigarettes, this is going to be a public health win. And so I've always sat here and said, if you're going to have a young person doing anything, wouldn't you want them to be doing the least harmful thing? I mean, then not, than just smoking a cigarette. So, but one of the ways that this could be reformed is if, you make e-cigarettes more widely available through an FDA, a regulated FDA marketplace, instead of increasingly putting restrictions on these to harm reduction products. Because I could understand why somebody who is just, might not know what's going on with the FDA, might not know the science, might not know, that cigarettes contain 600 ingredients, and when lit on fire, that we have 7,000 chemicals. They might not understand, again, that the combustion is what causes the harm, not the nicotine. But one of the things that, again, when you have 140 cigarettes approved for every one single e-cigarette, I can understand why most people would sit here and say that cigarettes are safer for you. I mean, the FDA sure wants to make sure you have access to those and not to these other products. But, and I think public awareness campaigns, but I mean, ideally too, I mean, I understand, they're trying to sit there and say, oh, significant progress was being made, but not really. I just pulled the numbers for 18 to 24-year-olds this morning. So in 2009, it was like, 23% that were like smoking. 2013, it's still around 23%. So that's after banning, flavors in cigarettes. It's after the federal tax. You don't really start seeing, young adult smoking rates start to really just significantly declining as 2016 and the advent of like the pod device. And that's another thing too with all these devices and how, it's kind of really the US marketplace has been very resilient for being a lot of uncertainty. But it's been because it's been so easily adaptable. We went from SIGA-likes to open systems and the mods and the, kind of clunky things to the pod device, which has really revolutionized it. And unfortunately, due to some reactionary policy at the federal level, that with, restricted flavored pod systems, now we have, this disposable stuff. And we'll see something's just going to happen again. I mean, it's just how it seems. That's how the free market works. And I love it.
You mentioned the FDA. So what do you think about the recent decision by the US president regarding layoffs at the agency? In which direction might the US nicotine industry go now?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, I know it's really big for us, but we've had probably about, in the States, it's like 11% of adults who smoke. We're some of the lowest rates ever. We definitely are a minority group, and even less that are actually vaping. So as far as, I guess, the immediate stuff that they're going to do with reforming, CTP, Center for Tobacco Products, is going to be, I don't know, I'm not very hopeful on it. I mean, it is part of a larger overhaul. We do have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that's been, promising a dramatic shift. And I actually think that you might see a lot more reforms just to the whole entire structure of the FDA. I mean, it's unfortunately it's just I don't think it's I know a lot of people were celebrating, Brian King is out, woo woo and everything. I mean, and as part of it's like, yeah, you didn't really do a lot for us. But I mean, this agency was already bogged down to begin with, and then now you just lost you lost even more employees. I mean, the only good thing is it's like who's going to do the enforcement actions? I guess they're not going to be banning, or like banning imports of e-cigarettes because there's nobody working there. But it does also mean that the 180 days that they could never make with the statutory requirement to approve an application is definitely not going to be met at this point anymore. And it could be, I mean. I know I always joke about reforming the TCA. Well, I joke about just dismantling the TCA, just ripping it up, starting all over again. You always have to face that thing that it could be way worse. And, you could get somebody in Center for Tobacco Products that, is just as bad as Brian King or even not even worse. I mean, never smoked, never hung out with people who smoke, doesn't looks at big tobacco, just trying to hook another generation of kids. Hopefully, nobody that is really tied to Bloomberg would want to even work for that for the administration. But it's going to be interesting. And unfortunately, too, because what we're seeing at the state level with these like vape directory bills that pretty much, knock out anything that doesn't have an FDA approval or whatnot. So it's like, oh, the 34 products and then the ones that are in regulatory limbo. Because the federal government is not going to be doing a lot of enforcement, the states are now going to be empowered to do their own policies to address so-called illicit Chinese vapes or whatever, or even, probably flavor bans. I imagine to see them happening too. So it's going to be, I would sit there and say to, everybody around the world, like, keep your eyes on us. Okay. I will be telling you, like, do not follow what the US does, as far as regulatory things do. But I understand that everyone's kind of watching us right now, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I'm hoping for a revolutionized marketplace, but I understand it's kind of a pipe dream. So.
And now I've got one question regarding nicotine pouches. Since they are currently a big issue in Europe, can you tell us how nicotine pouches are regulated in the US?
So they're going to have to go through the pre-market tobacco application process. So because that's anything that the predicate date. So any product, you had to have like a product that was substantially similar by, February 18th, 2007. Yeah, I think it's the 18th. It might be the 16th, February 2007. So yeah, you have to do the pre-market tobacco application process. So yeah, I mean, lots of science, lots of data. I don't know exactly how long it took. I think it took about two to three or maybe even 4 years for the ZYN authorization. I know there's a lot of pending. Again, there's a lot of pending applications that are probably not going to be worked on right now and everything. And I mean, that's going to be the one to watch, actually, especially when you're looking at the public health stuff, because the risk profile with the pouch is no different than a risk profile with Nicorette gum. And that's going to, especially when you're looking at, that's where you're going to, I think, see the pharma guys really come out against those ones, especially because there's going to be more variety of flavors. They're easily accessible. You're going to see them. I mean, I'm even now seeing like caffeine pouches now at gas stations and everything. So there's like this whole new like snooze pouch thing that's like happening. It's going to be interesting. And thankfully, at least in the States, we have not seen like a dramatic increase in youth use, despite like, you always go back to Juul. You have to wonder who did the most advertising. Was it Juul or was it public health and everything, and the news media and stuff. And there was a dramatic increase when you're like comparing the two numbers, but it's like 2.9% of youth that were using pouches last year. And that's despite all of this, media attention. I mean, I always sat here and said, I was like, well, they can't share them. I mean, unless you're swap and spit, they're not going to just be like, oh, here, try it. So it's going to be interesting to watch it and watch that, that industry come out. And I mean, again, this is the tobacco harm reductions, this consumer driven revolution that, again, 1976, people smoked for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. And now we're going to have this wide variety of products out there that can satisfy people's nicotine cravings without the harms associated with combustible smoking. And that's pretty awesome. And no, it's not big tobacco who did it.
Okay, and finally, what's your personal take? What do you think there's so much misinformation about vaping in the US? And how does it impact tobacco harm reduction efforts across the country?
So I've been sitting here thinking about this for a while, for the past year, because it's like, I've been doing this since 2016, and God, seeing the same arguments. And again, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, which is to be THR advocacy. But I've come to realize that, tobacco control there's two sides of the same coin, and it's big health and big tobacco, and both of them need each other to really much survive. Um, you have these products that are not only satisfying consumer demand. They're responsible for like a whole generation that's never going to smoke cigarettes. But there's a lot of money to be made in treating the cost of smoking. I remember trying to look at the numbers one time for I want to say it was Michigan. It was years ago, but I was trying to, and again, they're not 100% numbers, but I figured it out. It's for every $1 that big tobacco got in profits, big health was getting $3, whether it was from, pharmaceutical companies to hospitals to, all these specialties. My dad last year had a lung biopsy, and I walked in. I was like, "Yep, here's the wing that lung cancer and smoking bill." And I even asked his doctor, "What's the percentage of your patients that are smokers?" And yeah, overwhelmingly so. When you have something that's literally going to eradicate this, and it wasn't slow. I mean, vaping is not. This is a 20-year thing at boom. It's kind of like the industrial revolution for tobacco and everything. And I think that's where you're getting a lot of pushback. And then especially, I mean, again, I understand tobacco manufacturers who spend billions of dollars to get their products authorized. Then they're not only losing money through their combustible cigarettes, but they're also people are making hand over fist on these products that they didn't even notify the FDA, let alone get approvals. Is catch-22 on it. So I understand their problem with and all of that. And I understand too, they were kind of stunted. I mean, okay, China and India probably have the largest tobacco markets. And unfortunately, when you're looking at e-cigarettes, we don't have data on that because their governments just, they're banned in India and China. That's such a confusing situation over there. So when you're looking at the U.S. e-cigarette market, it is one of the largest markets in the world. And unfortunately, due to our federal regulations, all the innovation has been stifled. I mean, I know the TPD in Europe's pretty, you guys think it's really restrictive and everything, but our FDA regulations are a heck of a lot worse, actually. And as far as what's legal and what's not legal. But that being said, the majority of our products here in the States are completely illegal or illicit or whatever. Or I like to call them non-FDA regulated, but, to get rid of that negative connotation on it. But they've always been that way. Again, consumer-driven revolution. A lot. I mean, when you're looking at the vape shop and, these are people who quit smoking themselves and then started, tinkering around and making their own devices. And it's truly what I love about it. Okay. I mean, that you've actually forced, large tobacco companies to change their product portfolio. And it wasn't because of government regulations, with when you're looking at EVs or, electric vehicles or whatnot. No, this was oh God, we're losing market share. They're not smoking anymore. We got to get a product out there. We're not going to have any customers. And again, the tobacco companies should be allowed to exist. I'm not going to be on this whole they hook people and everything. There's so many industries out there that we could talk about that, get paid. There's hook people on everything. Some of them that are subsidized as well. So they're allowed to exist. I mean, we should be empowering them to actually bring a safer product to market, if not mandating it. So it's going to be interesting to see this pushback because I think, just for the record, I was looking at the numbers between 2022 and 2023 states among the state cigarette excise taxes, $1 billion in lost cigarette tax revenue. And that's awesome. Not for state coffers, but, it does show you the power that people you have some of the lowest rates of smoking. And there's going to be a lot of I always think if you got rid of cigarettes tomorrow, there'd be so many things missing because cigarettes have built a lot, whether, just a lot of hospitals and everything. So it's just a battle. It's just, again, two sides of the same coin, big health and big tobacco.
Thank you, Lindsey. That's all for today. Tune in next time here on GFN TV or on our podcast. And make sure to check out our social media pages for the latest updates on this year's Global Forum on Nicotine conference. Thanks for watching or listening. See you next time.